Hi everyone, I'm Aiden Durham with 180 Law Co. in Denver, Colorado, and you're watching All Up in Your Business. This episode, we're going to talk about trademarks and specifically what happens if you have a word from a foreign language in your trademark. Does that make a difference with trademark registration? Does it make a difference with trademark infringement? How does that play into it if you've got a foreign word in your US trademark registration? So number one, just off the bat, yes, you absolutely can register a trademark if it has a word or words, or if it's completely made up of words from a different language. It does not have to be English, all English, or even some English. You can absolutely register a trademark if it's in a different language or has elements that are in a different language. But how does that play into the application and registration process? Well, it's interesting because pretty much the trademark office, the USPTO, they're going to treat it as if it is the English equivalent of that word. And in your application, you have to specify if there are any English equivalents or translations in your trademark. So if you do have a trademark that has one word, let's say that's in Spanish, you have to indicate on your application that the translation in English means X. And the trademark office is going to evaluate your application and go through the process as if it was, for the most part, that English equivalent. They're not really paying a whole lot of attention to the foreign word itself. They're going to focus more on its English translation. Now, you don't have to indicate it or be especially concerned about it if it's a very commonly used foreign word in the English language. If it appears in the English dictionary, you're usually not going to have to identify it in your application. So some examples would be like karaoke. It's a Japanese word, but we've adapted it to the English language and it appears in our dictionary. And so for all intents and purposes, it's essentially an English word now for our use. Same with salsa. Salsa is a Spanish word, but we use it every day in English for the most part. And so that's something you don't have to identify. Or like rendezvous, a fancy French term, rendezvous. But we use it in English, so you don't have to worry about that. But if it's something that's not a commonly used term in the English language, it's best to identify it in your application. And so, as I mentioned, the application is going to be evaluated and looked at as if it were in English for the most part. So what this means is that there can still be issues. There can still be a likelihood of confusion between your trademark, which may be in Spanish, and this other trademark, which is in English, but translated may mean the same thing or something similar. So you can't avoid that likelihood of confusion issue just by changing a word or all of the words necessarily to some other language. That by itself usually isn't really going to get around that because it's still going to be considered as if it were all in English. Now, of course, this is not a hard and fast rule. There's no black and white to, yes, this one's in Spanish, but it's the Spanish equivalent of this one, and therefore it's a no-go. Really in trademarks, there's no black and white rule. We're always floating in this fun little gray area with trademarks, and it's never a very clear answer. So, in some instances, having that word be translated, having that word in a different language might be enough to avoid likelihood of confusion. It depends on a million factors of how you're using it, how the other person's using it, and other unending amounts of factors. But for the most part, the general idea is treat it as if it is the English equivalent of whatever that word or phrase is, because generally speaking, that's how the USPTO is going to look at it. That's all for this episode. Thank you to those of you who submit questions and requests for topics. This video is because someone requested it. If there's a topic that you would like me to talk about, or if you have a general question that you would like me to discuss, please feel free to comment below. If you're venturing into the wild world of trademarks and would like any assistance, you can contact me. You'll find my contact info in the description of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Aiden Durham, and I'll see you next time.